Welcome to Unwrap Reality, where we narrate stories on things that happen in real life.
What do you do when the person who vowed to love you forever starts slipping away? When their promises feel like lies, and every glance at their phone feels like a betrayal waiting to be uncovered? For me, Hazel Bennett, that nightmare became my reality. It all started with small things. Late-night texts he wouldn't explain, hurried excuses about work emergencies, and an emotional distance that grew wider with each passing day. But nothing could prepare me for what came next. A tangled web of secrets that would change everything. My name is Hazel Bennett, and until recently I thought I had it all figured out. A cozy home in the suburbs, a stable job as a graphic designer, and Daniel, my husband of 6 years. On paper, we were the perfect couple. In reality, not so much. Over time, Daniel changed. He stopped asking how my day was or even looking me in the eye during dinner. His once warm smile now seemed forced, his laughter hollow. At first, I told myself it was stress from work. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Then there was Sophia Lane, the woman whose name haunted my thoughts more than I cared to admit. She worked as Daniel's secretary, and though I'd never met her, her presence loomed large over our marriage. Rumors trickled through mutual friends, how she stayed late at the office, how they went on business trips together. Each detail chipped away at my trust until I barely recognized the life I was living. Our house, which used to feel like a sanctuary, turned into a prison of unanswered questions. Every creak of the floorboards made me wonder if he was sneaking around again. And then came the invitation, a business trip to a remote cabin retreat for networking. At least, that's what Daniel said it was. But something about the way he avoided my gaze when he mentioned it made my stomach churn. I agreed to go, partly because I needed a break and partly because I hoped it might help us reconnect. What I didn't know then was that this trip wasn't just any getaway. It was the beginning of a chain reaction I couldn't have predicted. As I packed my bags, I noticed Daniel acting strangely calm, almost relieved. Was he glad to see me leave? Or was there something else going on? The night before I left, I caught him scrolling through his phone again. This time, I didn't look away. Instead, I asked him point blank, "Who are you texting?" He froze, his fingers hovering over the screen before mumbling something about a client. But I saw the guilt flash across his face. That moment confirmed what I'd feared all along. He was lying to me. Little did I know, this trip would uncover far more than just Daniel's infidelity. It would introduce me to someone I never expected to meet and lead to a decision that would alter the course of my life forever. The unexpected companion. When I arrived at the cabin, I wasn't sure what to expect. The drive up had been quiet, almost eerily so, and the thought of spending 2 days surrounded by nothing but trees and silence felt both daunting and strangely comforting. But then I saw him. Noah Lane. My heart sank the moment I recognized his face from the photos Daniel kept casually dismissing whenever I asked about Sophia. This was her husband, the man who'd been unknowingly betrayed alongside me. And now, here we were, standing awkwardly in front of a rustic cabin neither of us wanted to be at. At first, neither of us said much. We exchanged polite greetings, pretending this wasn't the most bizarre coincidence either of us had ever experienced. Noah seemed just as uncomfortable as I was, though there was something in his eyes, a mix of sadness and frustration that mirrored my own feelings. It didn't take long for the tension to break, though. Over coffee that first evening, he finally spoke up. "I know why you're here," he said, his voice low but steady. "And I think we both know this isn't really about business." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. He knew. Somehow, he already knew about Daniel and Sophia. We spent hours talking that night, sharing pieces of our lives that no one else understood. Noah told me how Sophia had grown distant over the past year, always making excuses to stay late at work or attend events without him. He admitted he'd suspected something was wrong, but never imagined it would involve someone like Daniel. Someone who seemed so ordinary, so unremarkable. Hearing him talk made me realize how similar our situations were. Both of us had been lied to, manipulated, and left behind while our partners carried on with their secret lives. For the first time in months, I didn't feel completely alone. As the hours passed, the air between us shifted. the initial awkwardness gave way to something deeper. A shared understanding that went beyond words. There were moments when our laughter filled the room, breaking the heaviness of the conversation. Other times, we sat in silence, each lost in our thoughts. But even in those quiet moments, I could feel a connection forming, fragile yet undeniable. By the end of the night, I found myself wondering if this trip might not be as terrible as I'd feared. Maybe, just maybe, it would give me a chance to start healing, or at least figure out what came next. Tension turns to connection. By the second day, something had shifted between Noah and me. The awkwardness from the beginning was gone, replaced by an unspoken bond that felt almost magnetic. We spent hours hiking through the woods surrounding the cabin, talking about everything and nothing at all. He told me stories about his childhood, how he'd always dreamed of being a writer, but ended up working in construction instead because life got in the way. I shared bits of my own story too, things I hadn't even admitted to myself before. Like how lonely I'd felt for years, long before Daniel started pulling away. There was one moment during our hike when we stopped at a small clearing overlooking a lake. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and for a brief second, it felt like the world outside didn't exist. That's when Noah turned to me and said, "Do you ever wonder if they feel guilty? Or if they even care?" His question caught me off guard, not because it was unexpected but because it cut so close to the truth. I shook my head slowly, unsure of what to say. Did Daniel feel guilty? Probably not. And Sophia? She seemed too wrapped up in her own lies to think about anyone else. But as I looked at Noah, I realized neither of us deserved this pain. That night, back at the cabin, we sat by the fire, sharing a bottle of wine. The conversation grew heavier as we delved deeper into the betrayals we'd endured. Noah confessed he'd once considered leaving Sophia, packing up his things and starting over somewhere new. But fear held him back. The fear of being alone, of failing, of losing himself completely. Hearing him speak so openly made me reflect on my own fears. Was I staying with Daniel out of love or habit? Had I been clinging to a relationship that no longer existed just because letting go felt impossible? For the first time, I allowed myself to entertain the idea of walking away. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. As the fire crackled softly in the background, Noah leaned closer, his expression serious yet tender. "You deserve better than this," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "We both do." In that moment, I felt something stir inside me, a flicker of hope I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't romantic, not yet anyway, but it was powerful. A connection forged in shared pain, vulnerability, and the quiet understanding that maybe, just maybe, we could help each other heal. Little did I know, this newfound closeness would lead to a decision neither of us anticipated, and consequences neither of us could have foreseen. One night changes everything. That night, something changed between Noah and me. Something neither of us could ignore. The wine had loosened our inhibitions, and the weight of everything we'd shared hung heavy in the air. As we sat by the fire, the silence between us grew charged, electric. It wasn't just sadness or anger anymore. It was something else entirely, a longing for connection, for release from the pain that had consumed us for so long. At some point, Noah reached out and took my hand. His touch was gentle but firm, grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. "Hazel," he said softly, his voice trembling slightly, "I don't want to hurt you, but I can't keep pretending this isn't real." His words sent a shiver down my spine, not because they scared me, but because they resonated so deeply. For weeks, months, I'd been drowning in loneliness, betrayal, and self-doubt. And here was someone who understood exactly what I was going through, someone who saw me when everyone else had looked away. Before I could respond, he leaned in and kissed me. It was hesitant at first, as if he were afraid I'd pull away. But when I didn't, when I kissed him back, it became something more, something fierce and desperate. That night, we gave in to the emotions we'd been trying so hard to suppress. It wasn't just physical. It was an escape, a rebellion against the lies and heartbreak that had defined our lives for too long. In each other's arms, we found solace, even if only for a moment. When the sun rose the next morning, reality came crashing back. I lay there beside Noah, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to answer. What had we done? Was this just a fleeting moment of weakness, or something more? Guilt gnawed at me, but beneath it was something else, a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in years, I felt alive, truly alive, in a way I hadn't thought possible. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this decision would change everything, and not just for me, but for both of us. Little did I know, the consequences of that night would ripple far beyond anything I could have imagined. Life-altering news. Weeks passed after that weekend at the cabin, and life seemed to settle back into its usual rhythm. Or so I thought. At first, I tried to convince myself that what happened between Noah and me was a one-time thing, a fleeting moment born out of pain and desperation. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Something had shifted inside me during those days in the woods, something I couldn't ignore no matter how hard I tried. Then came the nausea. At first, I chalked it up to stress or maybe food poisoning, but when it persisted for days on end, I couldn't deny the truth any longer. I bought a pregnancy test on a whim, half hoping it would come back negative. When the little plus sign appeared, my heart sank. I sat there on the bathroom floor, staring at the stick in my hand, trying to process what this meant. There was no denying whose baby it was. It couldn't possibly be Daniel's. We hadn't been intimate in months, not since his affair with Sophia began, which left only one possibility: Noah. My mind raced with questions I didn't have answers to. How could this happen? What was I supposed to do now? And most importantly, how would Noah react when he found out? The guilt hit me like a tidal wave. Here I was, carrying the child of my husband's mistress's husband, a situation so twisted it felt like something out of a soap opera. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger staring back at me. Was I still the same Hazel who had gone to that cabin hoping for clarity? Or had I become someone else entirely? Someone reckless and impulsive? Someone capable of making decisions I never thought I'd make? The weight of it all was suffocating, and yet, amidst the chaos, there was a tiny flicker of hope. A part of me wondered if this baby might be the fresh start I'd been searching for. Even if it came wrapped in complications I couldn't begin to untangle. But the bigger question loomed over me. What was I going to do next? Telling Daniel was out of the question. He'd never believe me, and even if he did, it would destroy whatever shred of our marriage remained. As for Noah, the idea of telling him terrified me. Would he want to be involved? Would he resent me for keeping this secret? Or worse, would he walk away, leaving me to face this alone? I spent sleepless nights wrestling with these thoughts, torn between fear and determination. Whatever choice I made, one thing was certain: nothing about my life would ever be the same again. A bold decision. After weeks of agonizing over what to do, I finally made the decision to tell Noah. It wasn't easy. I rehearsed the conversation in my head 100 times, imagining every possible reaction he might have. Would he be angry? Relieved? Or would he shut me out completely? I didn't know, but I couldn't keep this secret buried any longer. So one evening, I called him and asked to meet at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. When I told him, his face went pale, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence between us was deafening, filled with unspoken questions and emotions too raw to put into words. To my surprise, Noah didn't lash out or walk away. Instead, he took a deep breath and said, "We're in this together, Hazel. Whatever happens next, we'll figure it out." His words caught me off guard, not because they were unexpected, but because they carried so much weight. In that moment, I realized Noah wasn't just the man who'd shared my pain. He was someone willing to stand by me, even when the circumstances were messy and complicated. Over the next few weeks, we talked endlessly about what this meant for both of us. We agreed to keep the baby, but raising it wouldn't be easy. Not with Daniel and Sophia still lurking in the shadows of our lives. The real shock came when I decided to confront them both. I couldn't let them continue living their lives while I carried the consequences of their betrayal. One afternoon, I invited Daniel and Sophia to meet me at a neutral location, a park where none of us had any ties. When they arrived, their expressions shifted from confusion to panic as I laid everything bare. I told them about the cabin, about Noah, and about the baby I was carrying. For once, they were speechless. Daniel looked like he'd been punched in the gut, while Sophia's face turned ghostly white. It was painful to watch, but also strangely satisfying. They'd caused so much destruction in their pursuit of selfish desires, it was time they faced the fallout. In the end, the truth set me free in ways I never expected. Daniel moved out shortly after, unable to look me in the eye anymore. Sophia disappeared from our lives altogether, leaving Noah to pick up the pieces of his shattered marriage. As for me, I chose to start fresh. With Noah by my side, I embraced the idea of building a new life, one rooted in honesty, trust, and love. Our baby became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light can find its way through. Looking back now, I realize that weekend at the cabin wasn't just a turning point. It was the beginning of a journey toward healing and redemption. And though the road ahead won't always be easy, I know I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. So, here's my question to you. When life hands you a twist you never saw coming, how do you choose to move forward? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Unwrap Reality for more tales that explore the complexities of love, betrayal, and second chances.